What? Wow.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is me, Lex, and if you are new here, I would absolutely love it if you like the content, if you support this content, if you could please like, share, comment, and subscribe because it does really help my channel. I know that so many of you have come from Love is Blind or other different videos, but a taste of what you can definitely expect here is definitely more TV show recaps, movie, documentary recaps, as well as pop culture recaps. So definitely check out the content here on the channel if you like it. One other thing I just want to put out there, and I want to say this very kindly, okay? This is not meant to be, it's no beef, it's no hard feelings with anybody, but I think a lot of you guys, because I am a smaller channel, you guys do tend to give your feedback, your criticisms. I think a lot of you feel maybe more entitled to give it because I'm a smaller channel. But I would like to say, like, I do think there's a difference between, like, constructive feedback versus kind of like demanding the way that I do my channel, okay? Like, I think at the end of the day, yes, I am a small channel. Yes, I'm just starting out, and there has been a lot of things that you guys have suggested that I've straight up implemented because I'm like, yeah, as viewers, I want this to be the best experience it can be for all of you. But I think there are certain things where it's like, there are still, at the end of the day, creative decisions and things that I'm going to do for my channel that are like my choice because this is my channel, if that makes sense. So like, I always welcome feedback. I always welcome critique. I always welcome suggestions, but I think we need to make sure and remember that they are just suggestions, and ultimately the final say will come down to me. Another big thing is, let's not be in the comments accusing people of things, accusing people of certain viewpoints. It's fine to disagree with somebody. It's fine to disagree with what someone says. You don't have to agree with someone's take. And I do see some of you guys having like small discourse in the comments in some of the videos, and that is totally fine. However, I don't need people to be attacking people, accusing people of saying things, accusing people of certain viewpoints. All of that behavior I'm definitely going to need, to kind of rein it in, okay? We need to be kind, we need to be nice. If you are saying negative stuff, I will remove your comment and I will block you. I don't care. I'm not that girly that's gonna be having people attacking people on my videos. I want this to be a safe space. I want this to be enjoyable for everyone. So that's all I have to say there. But to everybody who watches and has continued to support, thank you so much. You guys are the best. You guys are amazing. And as I said, no worries about like respectful discourse, respectful criticism, respectful suggestions. I think the problem starts to come where people get like, kind of get loose with the lips a little bit. That's when things start to get weird. So let's all be kind. Anyways, today we are going to talk about Quiet on Set, the dark side of children's TV. And let me just tell you guys this. Watching this was a tough one because I'm a Nickelodeon kid. I grew up watching every single show that was on that documentary, and I feel like it is so heartbreaking, some of the things that have been experienced by these kids, some of the things that they're still going through due to this treatment. And it was just gut-wrenching. I mean, we obviously know Jeanette McCurdy has spoken out a lot about her experience at Nickelodeon, but I think just so many other people coming forward has really been a big one, including Drake Bell. He's obviously probably one of the biggest names on this that came forward and told his story. So I do first want to start off with a trigger warning. I'm not going to go into immense detail about anything because, one, this is YouTube and I don't want them to block my video. But number two, I also just want to keep this as safe as possible for everyone to watch. However, if you are triggered by themes of abuse, themes of SA, themes of other types of violence, neglect. If any of that triggers you, please don't watch this video, okay? Because there still might be allusions to things that people have said. And again, I want this to be a safe space for everyone. So trigger warning there. Please don't continue if that is something that bothers you. And of course, I'll put the trigger warning in the comments and not the comments, the description and things like that. Anyways, I don't necessarily think I'm going to do a play-by-play of each and every episode. I think I'm going to kind of try to go in chronological order of how the documentary centers things. But I think I'm just going to talk about kind of the big parts. And then also the post response. There has been so many people that have come out, that have responded, that have made TikToks, that have like really dug into this. So I also want to shine and showcase some of that content. I think there is just so much with this entire thing, and I do want to give a lot of my thoughts. I think before I even start the recap, one thing for me that I thought is very weird, and someone I believe either made a TikTok or just talked about this as well, is that I don't think that people understand these are people's real lives. You know, these stars that have come forward, there is mention of Amanda Bynes in the documentary. There is mention of Jeanette McCurdy in the documentary. They do not show up, but they are mentioned. And people have been, I believe, kind of coming really hard at them, expecting them to come on season 2 or expecting them to come and tell their stories. And it's like, these are people's real traumas. The people that came forward, I'm sure that it took them so much to actually be able to speak with us and to actually be able to like tell these stories. And I feel like it's really defeating the purpose of even making a documentary like this when people feel like they are entitled to these stars coming forward and talking about their trauma. Ariana Grande is another name where a lot of people have been speculating that she did certain things and that's why she's so famous. And it's just really crazy, in my opinion, to speculate on those things. I think that people really need to recognize, again, these are not just figures, right? They're real people that have really struggled immensely with coming on this documentary. So those are my initial thoughts, but let's jump in. So we get to episode 1 and immediately they are starting off strong. They are giving us some very key players from the beginning. Our first key player is Dan Schneider. Obviously,
if you've been online this week, you may have come across the scandal surrounding former Nickelodeon producer Dan Schneider, who was behind popular shows like The Amanda Show, iCarly, Drake and Josh, Victorious, and more. In a new docuseries, Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV, Schneider is accused of inappropriate and abusive behavior against people on set, including child actors and female writers. Now he has responded to those accusations in an interview with actor Boogie, who was on iCarly. The TV producer spoke about Brian Peck, a dialogue coach who went to prison on 2 counts of child sex abuse. Schneider said he was not responsible for hiring Peck, who sexually abused actor Drake Bell, who worked on The Amanda Show and Drake and Josh. Schneider said he was more devastated by that than anything that ever happened to me in my career thus far. A Nickelodeon spokesperson told CBS News in a statement that it can't corroborate or negate allegations from productions decades ago. And in the interview, Schneider said he is embarrassed and regrets his behavior, adding he owes people a pretty strong apology. He also addressed some of the other allegations highlighted in the docuseries, including sexually suggestive jokes that he included in some of the shows, saying he's in favor of cutting them out now if they're upsetting to viewers. 2 female writers on The Amanda Show alleged they had to split a salary in order to get hired, something Schneider said he had no control over. He apologized for treating people poorly and admitted that he should not have asked people to give him massages on set. Former Zoey 101 actor Alexa Nichols slammed Schneider's interview in a new YouTube video, saying she feels no remorse from the producer and would have preferred a private apology. I know everyone deals with their own emotions in their own way, but I don't feel anything from you, Dan, Nicholas said.
If you don't know who Dan Schneider is, he is like the executive producer of basically all Nickelodeon shows. iCarly, Victorious, Henry Danger, Drake and Josh, all that. All that is a key player. We learn a lot about all that. The Amanda Show. I mean, literally, if you're a Nickelodeon kid, probably every show you watched was a Dan Schneider produced show. He was like the big dog at Nickelodeon. And so we learned a little bit about him from the get, that this man grew up in Memphis. His father went to Harvard, and there was some stories out that he had went to Harvard, even though he actually did not go to Harvard. And, he basically got his first big break as the producer and writer on All That. And he wanted All That to essentially be an SNL for kids, which, yeah, if you grew up watching All That, The Amanda Show, I think for myself and many other kids, 90s and early 2000s kids, that's our first foray into sketch comedy. And I think that when watching those shows, I remember being a kid and thinking those shows were a little weird. I'm not going to hold you, but I didn't think of it extremely deeply, right? So we learned that, and he gets this role as the writer and all that. That is kind of his first role. We are introduced to two key players from that show, two of the actresses, Leon Frierson and Katrina Johnson. Katrina Johnson, girl, I think, honestly, she kind of dodged a bullet. I know for her in the documentary, she kind of discusses not getting certain opportunities, but I feel like for her, it's kind of great that she got out of the pipeline where she did. And that's not to say she didn't go through abuse, because she did. She straight up went through abuse. So Katrina Johnson, Dan Schneider was her mentor. He was the person that was in the room trying to get her opportunities, encouraging her, talking with her parents. A lot of the kids do mention that Dan Schneider was this mentor to them, or this almost I don't know, I don't want to say father figure, but he was in a lot of their interviews. They were with him more than they were with their own parents. And he already becomes this facet where he almost implanted himself into their lives. So for a lot of these kids, Dan Schneider is this man they remember when they were little kids. Again, she says that Dan Schneider was at all of her callbacks, all of her auditions, cheering them on, and they do mention that he was incredibly supportive of them, which I think is an interesting thing of abusers, right? A lot of times abusers, they will kind of find a way to wiggle their way into your trust. And a lot of again, these actors and actresses mention that Dan was that person. So when the pilot of All That was chosen, Dan Schneider, according to Katrina, Dan Schneider picked her specifically. He told her, I choose you. You're my star, basically. And from then on, that was kind of where it was. So Katrina's on All That, she's doing her thing, and at this point, he's really loving her. She's a star. And it got to the point where Dan Schneider actually called Katrina's parents back about her having her own show called The Katrina Johnson Show. Keep that in mind, because The Katrina Johnson Show, it doesn't come to be, obviously, if you're a Nickelodeon kid, but keep that in mind, And one thing that they also discuss, Katrina, Leon, many of the kids on these shows, is that Dan Schneider was providing a fun environment. He was providing fun sets for the kids. He was providing, an experience where they enjoyed what they were doing. A lot of these kids were I'm 8 years old and I'm on this super fun set every day and I don't have to be in school. So it's of course for the kids, they wanted this for themselves. We pan a little bit over to Leon. Now, Leon was also on All That, and he talks a lot about how he felt uncomfortable with the sketches he was in from the get. One of those big sketches that he was part of was called Noseboy. And in Noseboy, not only was he wearing a leotard that he said, I was growing, I was just getting comfortable with my body. I had to wear this leotard that was basically just underwear and tights, but he was also made to have two giant noses on his shoulders in that sketch. But the two big noses looked like male genitalia. I can't say it on YouTube. But the two noses looked like that. And one of the skits, he had to sneeze and it looked like a shot. So remember, as an 8-year-old kid, he was already kind of like, I'm not comfortable with my body. I don't like this. And then now you're making me do these skits and it looks like a... And that was a very common theme, this shot content. Like, you see that throughout many Nickelodeon shows.
One of the most disturbing memories that I have would probably be the backpack episode with Jamie Lynn Spears.
Just bite the tip.
There are these goo pops and my character can't get it open.
It's not coming out.
And it ends up squirting onto Jamie's face. So the prop person comes onto set with a syringe. We all like stood behind the camera to watch. It lands on her face. So first it was Dan roaring, laughing, and then everyone kind of giggling. We heard the boys saying, it's a shot. And I had no idea what that meant. Once I saw it again as an adult was when that memory came back. So I was like, oh. It wasn't funny. It still isn't funny to me, to be honest. It's just like, as a kid. And she was on set that day and sorry. Just as a mom, like, if my daughter was ever put in that, it's gross. It's like it's appalling behavior on all the adults' behalf that day.
Victorious, Zoe 101. There are so many shows where there's clearly a young girl getting in the face. So again, like I said, as a kid, right, I think a lot of us thought, ugh, that's nasty because snot is nasty. But you really look back at it now as an adult and you're like, damn, like this was foul. Like this was absolutely awful. And it really like both, like Leon realized that he had to stay on Dan's side to be more famous. And a lot of the kids talk about him and another black girl as well. They both realized, the black actors and actresses on the set realized, like, they needed to stay on Dan's good side to be more famous. And this was of everybody, but I do think that it's important, and something I do not want to gloss over when talking about this documentary is the presence of racism, sexism, things like that. And I think it is not lost that the black actors and actresses on these shows, the black children, they realize, like, we're not Dan's favorites. Like, we are not Dan's favorites. We are definitely being treated in a way that is not as desirable as some of these young white children. You know, we are not being made into stars. You know, we're being made to have these very embarrassing roles that, you know, so I just think when we talk about this, we should not lose the idea of racism or like gloss over it, because yes, Dan's horrible, but I think especially if you were a black child on those sets, you were feeling it even worse sometimes. So Katrina, you know, we pan back a little bit to her. Katrina talks about how Dan had called her parents one day and basically told her that she was getting too fat. Like, just off the random, that she was getting fat.
Sexual abuse of Drake Bell from dialogue coach Brian Peck. Several people came forward with allegations of harassment and intimidation from producer Dan Schneider. What was a bit of your experience, if you can share that with us?
Well, I actually had a rather positive experience with Nickelodeon and Dan Schneider. He was my mentor, and he helped foster all my creativity. We worked on quite a few sketches together and developed characters together, and I didn't really have any of those bad experiences that the other people had. I had my own disappointments. I was supposed to get my own show, and then the network decided that it should go instead to Amanda Bynes because I sort of aged out. They wanted me to be a baby, and then once I went through puberty, I wasn't quite the baby anymore, so then they got a new one. And there were some issues with them saying that I was too fat. And that stuck with me a little bit through the years. But, once I went through puberty, then I was too skinny. So it was all these different little things, but nothing really negative with Dan Schneider.
Right.
Just
nothing is salacious.
right.
Okay, well, so based on that, and based on your experience, and of course now hearing others' experience.
And he had said some phrase basically to the tune of, we already got one fat one, we can't have another. So at this point, Katrina is devastated because she is going through puberty. She's a young girl, she's going through puberty, and she's growing into her body. And I mean, we've all gone through puberty, male, female, however you identify, right? And when you're going through puberty, your body can go through so many changes, especially as a young girl or young woman. So it's like, to be called back and told, oh, you're getting fat was a lot for her. And basically, she went through puberty and was eventually told by Dan that they didn't like her grown woman body. Basically, she says it in these words that because she didn't have the body of a young girl anymore and that she had more of a grown woman body, that she was slowly phased out of the show because Dan didn't like that. Next player, Amanda Bynes. So at this point, Katrina is actually invited to go to Amanda Bynes casting call with Dan. And at this point, Amanda is charismatic. She's a young girl, so she's cute. Dan is in love with her. Dan wants her immediately. And again, Amanda Bynes does not show up in this documentary. So everything is just kind of off of what everyone else that worked with said. But, Dan wanted Amanda on all that immediately. Again, Dan was a creep. Dan was a creep, And I will say, it is very weird to think about how this grown man was here casting these kids at this high level. When I look back at Nickelodeon, I'm like, that is actually wild as heck. That this network is fully kids, all kids, and this grown man, along with a few other grown men, were the ones not only going to these casting calls, looking at these kids, picking which kid is gonna be the cutest to be a star, but then it's also these kids were always just around these adults all day. They were around the adults all day. They mentioned that their parents were supposed to be there, but a lot of times they were not, or they were not allowed to be there. Their parents were barred from coming onto those sets. So a lot of these kids were just left alone with this grown man all day, or these grown men. Oh, child. But, Leon, so Katrina, so yeah. And Leon does touch on this where he says, he did go to school on set. Some of the kids were in school on set, but Amanda was never present. Apparently at this point, Amanda was spending a lot of time with Dan writing skits and pitching ideas. Mind you, we're talking about a 5-year-old kid who was spending time with Dan writing skits and pitching ideas. A 5-year-old. Because I'm pretty sure she was 5 or 6 at this point. Okay. So Amanda, and they do also talk a lot about Amanda Bynes' parents, and her dad in particular was very hands-on with her career. He was very involved in this stuff. Okay. And treated her like a doll. And Amanda has said that. I do believe, Amanda has came out and said in adulthood, she could never be who she wanted to be. Even today, people make fun of Amanda. People drag her, say, what is Amanda Bynes doing? But in reality, I think this is the first time in Amanda's life that she's actually been able to be who she wants to be. Amanda's, this is the first time she can get up, be her, do what she likes. We've seen her go to art school. We see her get tattoos. We see her change her look a lot. And it's okay, to some of us, that may look like really, behavior that seems very impulsive or whatever. But imagine if you were a kid where your whole life was contrived from the time you were a child. I think you would really be excited to actually be able to get up and be who you want to be. And I think Amanda got that opportunity now. And we see that from the beginning, where they treated her like a doll. Her father treated her like a doll. Dan treated her like a doll. They handcrafted Amanda's career. Like, literally, wrote it down to the bottom. How are we going to get this girl famous? And she didn't have a say in it. And it is sad to see. It's sad to think about. It's sad to experience because, again, remember, we're talking about a 5, 6, 7-year-old girl. This girl wasn't even a teenager yet, and all of this was being done. Amanda's on go mode from the time she was a kid. So, in comes the Amanda show. Remember, it was going to be the Katrina Johnson show, right? But Katrina was not Dan's taste anymore, essentially. And so it was the Amanda show. And I mean, I grew up watching the Amanda show. I remember thinking it was very funny. I will say though, I do remember that show being a little weird to me. Even as like an 8-year-old or whatever, however old I was, I do remember thinking that show was a little sus. I ain't gonna hold you. That show and iCarly, I mean, I watched iCarly, but babe, it was weird. It was weird. So one of the things that, made Amanda very famous, according to, some people in the documentary, and I do like this take and think it is very, very true, but they really discussed that Amanda deviated from the regular roles that women tended to hold in Hollywood at that time period. Women were either like hypersexual or very innocent, like Full House or those type of roles, or they were hypersexual. There was no in between, right? So Amanda kind of introduced this new archetype of like the funny girl, the sketch comedian, like she's cute, but she's funny. Like it was really different, but it worked. It really worked. And Dan thought he hit the jackpot at that point. He's like, oh, wow, I really hit that jackpot. So one of the characters on the Amanda show, played by Amanda, is Penelope Taint.
Okay, you better believe I went back to the website and I went through every year to see what was going on there. So I already talked about in one of my videos that I believe that Dan Schneider was catering to a specific audience. That's how he became such a hit on these shows, was that he was able to bring in a huge amount of viewers because he was catering to adults that were into some gross stuff. I truly believe that he put these shots on TV because he had an adult fan base that he was catering to. I was going back and watching some of these old Penelope clips for one of the last videos I did. I got this really weird feeling from one of them. I'm going to show you guys. Basically, they are listing off a bunch of facts about Amanda, which she was a kid at this point, and this is not a character. They're actually using her real name, using real stats about her. It's giving the vibes of putting a child in danger before the internet was a place where people were just posting their kids with all their kind of weird, especially now that we know that AmandaPlease.com is us just saying a man to please. Like, who was going to this website and what was going on there. So bad news for Dan Schneider. I was able to find it. I went into the archive and right away you see some weird things, right? There's body parts, sniffing shoes, dirty foot, toenail. The good news for Dan Schneider is that all of these video links are broken, probably for the best. If we go back to the game section for a website that is for a 13-year-old little girl, there is one game called Color My Belly and another game called Name That Body Part. They made an entire game and made her take these pictures. Carousels of her hands, her elbows. This was another killed video link, my Amanda poem called Body Parts. If you go back to the archive, this is a couple years later, you'll see Amanda gargles, Amanda squirts cheese in her hand, Amanda dances with banana, Amanda shoe trick, sneak peek number 1, journalism in the jacuzzi, popper pants, Mr. Old Man, girls' room tryouts. And here's the fake ad section. Remember those commercials they used to do? These are children. And here they are on the set of that fake ad Her and Drake Bell. How interesting. And lastly, a lot of the scrapbook stuff was gone, but I thought this was a weird one. A picture of Amanda that some adult captioned, "There's only one girl on this green earth who can wear giant fake teeth with braces and still be beautiful." I just wonder if there was traffic to that website from the wrong crowd and what those photo shoots for that website were like for those kids.
I vividly remember Penelope Tane. I remember that voice. I will remember that voice for the rest of my life. The Penelope Tane, them glasses, them braces. But, you know, Dan, they have some of the writers from the writer's room, 2 women from the writer's room, and one of them discusses how when they were writing this character, Dan was like, don't tell what the real meaning of taint is. You know, don't tell. Don't say anything. I think this is hilarious. Dan gave very like sick humor, weird kid, sick humor. And so the writers are like, I don't like it, but okay. And there were points where Dan was asked, or let me not even say Dan, but like Amanda or somebody would say like, what is the taint? And he would always be like, oh, it means tainted. It means tainted. It means like, oh, something's tainted or bad. You know, he specifically told them never say what the actual meaning of the taint is. But remember, we're talking about a 5-year-old girl calling herself Penelope Taint. And again, when people look at Amanda nowadays and see whatever has happened to her, look at this. This girl was being hyper-actualized from the time that she was a young girl. A young girl. And that just happened. That just flew. A lot of us as kids were, I mean, like I said, I would watch the Amanda Show as a kid. Didn't nobody say nothing? So it's sad to see. It's very sad. And at this point, Dan and Amanda were getting much closer to each other. You know, she would constantly like be very like affectionate with him. She would be going behind him and hugging him. You know, they were constantly close to each other, and she would give him neck massages constantly, which this is a big theme that comes up, that Dan really liked the women in the writer's room or the actresses to give him massages. Ugh. It's like talking about this makes me feel so icky. But yeah, he really liked them to give massages. He really had, I guess, some kind of fetish when it came to the massages. So he was constantly asking them. And we go back to this one scene of Dan and Amanda in the hot tub in the Amanda Show. And again, I vividly remember this episode. I vividly remember this episode of Dan and Amanda just in the hot tub. And again, I feel like as a kid, I probably looked at it and was like, but it just stands out so heavily. It stands out so heavily. And again, the writers, they are so vocal in this. The writer, you know, Dan at one point, they're in the writer's room. They're all talking. They're all chatting. Dan literally asked one of the writers, Christy, to act like she's being, while telling a story about high school. This man hated women. He was sick towards children. He disliked women. And it was just an overall extremely humiliating place to be if you were a writer on this show, if you were involved in this show. It was really bad. And that's just part 1, y'all. That is just part 1. So I think I'm going to hold it here because there was so much to say just in part 1 of this video. Part 2, 3, and 4 will definitely be coming, but we're going to hold it here. Again, so far, thoughts are just, it's really sad to see what these kids were going through, because watching them as a kid, you're like, I don't want to say you envy them, but I mean, I guess you kind of envy them. You're like, look at them. They're famous. They're on magazine covers. They're in interviews. So it's really tough to watch. But Okay. If you got here, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. It all helps my channel to grow. Look, the watch hours is watch houring, but the subscriber count ain't subscriber counting, okay? I need y'all, you know, to help me with that because I'm really close to monetization, especially if I hit the subscriber count. So I would love it. It's free. All you gotta do is click. I'm not even asking y'all to do anything that costs money. So thank you for watching my videos, and I will talk to you guys in the next part. Bye.